Okay, can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me at the back? So, first of all, I have to apologize. I'm not a marketing person, so A, I still have most of my brain, and B, I'm not nearly as funny as the last guy. But what I'll try and do is keep this short, keep it interesting. I've got a lot of technical stuff in the slides, but I think what I'm going to do in order to make up some time is I'm going to cut out some of the slides and let you look at those in the handouts you got there, and I'll just show you some demos and keep it at demos. And then pass over to Eugene a little later. So my name is Mark Carroll. I'm the lead program manager on the application compatibility group, or application experience as we are now. And basically our job has been to make sure that applications continue to run when you upgrade to Windows XP. Sounds like a funny thing, but you know, most of the operating systems we've released, every version we've released, we've put a whole lot of new features in, we've made a load of changes to the OS. And every time people have gone to install it, they've upgraded, found half their apps didn't work. Probably not a new thing for a lot of you. Well, this time round, we've actually taken things very seriously. We've had a team of around 170 people now, mainly 140 testers, program managers, developers. We actually spend all our time every day testing applications on each new build of Windows XP as it comes out. And basically our job is to make sure that whatever we do in the OS, whatever features we add, whatever perf improvements, stability improvements we make, it doesn't break any applications. So we test around 1,200 applications a day. We have a new build of Windows comes out every day, and we have a huge team of people who just every day they're installing home apps, corporate apps, server apps, trying them out, making sure that basic functionality is still working. We have to look at two things. First of all, we need to make sure that anything that worked on Windows 2000, which was our baseline when we started moving forward for XP, it still works. So any new features that we put in, if an app was working on Windows 2000 and no longer works on that build of XP, then more than likely we've broken something. We've put a feature or done something in the build, one of the developers somewhere in the team has done something that's broken an app. So the first thing we do when we see that is we'll be hunting down the developer in whichever team it was that did the damage, and hammer their door down, then go and find their manager and make sure they fix it. So that was our number one goal, is that apps that work on Windows 2000 continue to work on Windows XP. There's going to be some apps that don't, and those are generally things like utilities, virus checkers and things that have a kernel mode driver or some sort of disk utility that are designed specifically for that version. But other than that, we're pretty much aiming for as many apps as we can. We'd like to hit 100%. I think reality says we'll be a little less than that. But we're trying to make sure that nearly every app that works on Windows 2000 will continue to work on Windows XP. At the same time, we had a huge challenge on our hands. There is thousands upon thousands of consumer apps out there that were written for Windows 95, Windows 98, that just maybe weren't written quite as well as they should have been. Come to try and run those on a slightly more stable OS, and something that actually doesn't allow apps to go stomping all over each other's memory and destroying everything in sight, actually make them behave properly. And we found that an awful lot of those apps broke. Just to give you an example, when we were testing games, we found that at the start of our testing period of the Windows 2000, we moved from Windows 2000 to XP, it was about 40% of the top games were working on Windows 2000. We've got that up to 93% now, and we're still going up. So it's been a lot of hard work, but we've got some very bright guys, and we've been working very hard on getting things working for people. So I guess one of the things people have asked me is, well, what are the top apps? It's not just been corporate apps, it really has been across the board. We've Barbie's Nail House, believe it or not. There's a Barbie game where you can paint different colored nails on a picture of Barbie's hand. You know, we got that one working pretty early on, because apparently that was important to a few people. But I don't know, some people like that kind of thing. We've gone all the way up to the very high-end server stuff, so we've really got a very broad range. And we've used market data from a number of different places to make sure that all the top-selling apps are on our lists. Not only the current selling apps, but also things that people have been using for years. We actually, one of the things we just succeeded in fairly recently was getting sound working in Doom, the first version of Doom. It's been out for around like 5 or 6 years now, I guess, but because Windows 2000, based on the NT kernel, wasn't designed for games, the DOS compatibility box never actually had sound drivers for it. We've had a lot of beta feedback over the last few months. there's still people playing Doom out there. So we put the sound drivers into the DOS box, and we have that running as well now. Yeah, I'm done with that slide. So I just wanted to very briefly touch on a few things that I may mention as we go along, just to make sure that I'm not confusing anyone. We have a definition of compatible app. A compatible app is something that works on the OS. We try and make it work like it did on a previous platform, but half the time on some of 9X apps, that means it runs terribly and breaks the OS, right? So we don't want it to work like it did on a previous platform. We want it to work better than it did on a previous platform. So actually, I'm going to go in and edit that slide when I get back. Next, we're looking for logoed applications. We're just working on now the Design for Windows XP logo for applications. And the idea here is we keep a fairly low bar. We make sure that developers do the right thing. We're not out to get all these exploitive apps that use all this high-end technology that's in there, but basically they just run well, they work properly, they don't crash, and they just work with all the standard features on Windows XP. Then the thing that's been around for Windows 2000 for quite a while has been a certified application. We had certified for Windows 2000 and so on. And that's a much, much higher bar, and that's something that's more aimed at large corporates and enterprise. And people that write something like WinZip or something, those guys, I very much doubt they're going to bother with certified. But at least we want to make sure they've hit the base logo bar, which means that they're not going to mess anything up on the system. Some of the other things here are technologies that I'm going to come on to later. We have compatibility fix and application help. And what I'm going to do is, rather than going through all the slides on those, I'm just going to show you those in a little while. This is the start of a whole section, which I normally do with developers. I'm not going to bother going through this now. I just wanted to give you an idea of the kinds of things we've seen. When we first tried testing these applications, we didn't get very far. Over 40% of the apps we tried just popped up a box that said, this requires Windows 95, sorry. And we couldn't get any further. And we're a long way past Windows 95 now, so it should have been okay. So what we had to do was we had to build some technologies that allowed our testers to be able to apply some sort of fix to this app, to fix whatever problem they were seeing, so that they could get on and test the rest of the application. Every time we got to an app that as soon as you pop the CD in, it said this requires Windows 95, that would mean sending it down to a developer. They'd have to debug it, work out what the problem was, fix that, and then send it back to the tester to test the application again. And that was just taking way too much time. So we had to work out some ways of getting around that. And I will show you those in just a moment. I'm going to get rid of all this. God, imagine how lucky you are. You've missed all this really boring technical stuff. I just want to stop on this one, actually. One of the things I mentioned was we probably won't hit 100% on Windows 2000 apps. And the main reason for that is kernel mode drivers. These are the things that when a virus vendor or an antivirus vendor, a virus that would have been a good one. Yeah, pretty much. Backup or disk utilities, that kind of thing. They need some sort of hook to get right in at the very, very low level of the system. And that's where they'd write a kernel mode driver. Now, those things are very much tied to the layout of the kernel, layout of the core system for that particular OS. So in most cases, they may or may not work on Windows XP. What we've been doing with those guys is, rather than trying to fix that app, we appreciate that doing that's probably going to cause problems. We've actually been working with them to get a new version of their driver ready for Windows XP. Also, we had a number of problems with some of the Windows 95, Windows 98 apps that has a very different driver architecture. So those guys have got a lot more work to do than just the little tweaks to go from 2000. But again, as soon as we've found any of those problems, we've been straight back to the ISV and trying to get them to actually fix their application. So I guess really just to summarize what was in total only me talking about 2 out of 10 slides. What I'd like you guys to do, and I'll show you how to do this in a little while, is test your applications. We've been testing as many as we can find. So we've got this core set of about 1,200 applications we're testing daily. We've covered probably about 5,000 or 6,000 in total. And we've had feedback from all of the OEMs, from the machine manufacturers, from news groups. We've had feedback from all different places about what people are using and what works and what doesn't work. But you guys are the ones now, you're the ones that have an opportunity to test your apps at home now. Let us know if you see any problems, and we can try and get those fixes into the OS before we ship. So this is one thing I need from you guys, is to go and test your stuff. If Barbie's nail house breaks again, let us know, okay? Because we like that app. So what I'm going to do is, rather than go through all this stuff, I'm actually just going to show you what we've got here. The first thing is app help. And one of the things we've found is, ideally, what we'd aim to do is, when we find an app that doesn't work, we want to actually fix it behind the scenes so that the end user doesn't actually see any difference, right? They run the app, it just works. That's what I expect to happen. They don't care what the technology is underneath. They don't care what clever stuff we've spent 2 years working on to do and want to tell everyone about. It doesn't matter to them. They just want the app to work. But there are also cases where us fixing it up underneath isn't going to actually get the right solution. Maybe, as I was saying before, the drivers. You need to download a new driver. You actually need to do something to the app. So rather than just popping up the dialog box that says this requires Windows 95 or this requires 2000, which wasn't really very helpful, what we tried to do is give the user an indication that, hey, we know about this app, we've tested it, we know there's a problem with it, we've worked with the vendor on fixing that problem, but you've got to go and do something yourself. You maybe got to go and download a driver or download a patch or something. And what I'll do is I'll show you that now. I'm actually going to use a couple of the antivirus apps here. First one here, McAfee Virus Scan. This is one of the earlier versions of McAfee, and anything below version 4.5, they said, hey guys, we don't want it running on XP. Okay, we've got newer versions that'll work fine, but the older ones we don't want it to run. So what we've done is we had some hooks inside the system itself so that when you try and run the actual setup for that app, or the app itself, if somehow you've managed to get it on the machine, we don't let it run. We catch it before it gets anywhere, before any code gets executed inside that program. And we get in the way, and we can put a message up here. And in this case, we've actually disabled the run program option as well. So there is no physical way you can run the setup for that app or run that app on this machine, on this system. So basically, you can't hose yourself. We think it's a good thing. But of course, because of that, people are going, well, hey, why is that not working? So we do actually provide some more information. Or in this case, not really much more information. But what we do is we provide a URL to go to the company's website to show, so that you can actually go and take a look and find out from them what really is the problem. I'm going to show you another one now, which is Norton Antivirus. Now, we've been working with the Symantec guys. Initially, this one was also a blocking message. This wouldn't let you install. But after having worked with them on this problem, we actually worked out they could update their driver, build a little download package that they put on their website, and allow you to install the app, run their little patch that they have, and the thing works just fine. Should work just fine. There's someone saying no there. Actually, yeah, we've gone back to them on that one. But the idea is that they have a package that does. You guys are going to be a difficult audience, I can tell. It was that last guy wound you up, didn't he? So again, in this case, we give you some information here. We tell you that the driver installed may cause your system to become unstable. I think in this case, it actually does cause your system to become unstable rather than may. And what we've done is we've put a pointer up to the Symantec website. Now, as someone pointed out here, they did have a patch. They've now taken it off. But on that website, they've put a thing saying, hey, we know there's a problem. We're fixing it up again. There'll be a new patch on the site. And the reason that we've got that going is because we're testing every build. And as soon as we find these problems, we're straight back onto these guys again. I mean, previous OSs, we wouldn't have found this stuff until we'd shipped. And then we get all these bug reports come in after we've shipped, by which time it's too late to do this stuff. So we are at least ahead of the game. Maybe it goes up and down per build, but we're keeping ahead of it. Someone appreciates that. I really don't think we need to go through all this, but still. So this is compatibility fixes are our technology that we have that I was saying before that allows us to get in behind the scenes. You run an application, rather than us saying, oh, we need to pop a message up, we go, oh, okay, this app's doing something wrong. We've seen what it was doing wrong in our testing. Our developers have debugged the app, and they do a fantastic job. They have no source code at all. They're literally debugging the app with just all the pure binary, whatever it is they have that they do. I don't even try to get involved in that. And they actually work out what the app's doing wrong, and then they have some technology they can build that actually fixes up the differences between what the app was expecting on Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows 2000, and what's actually happening now. In some cases, it was something simple as the app asking, hey, what version is this operating system? And it was expecting back version 4, which is what the 9X OSs would have given it. And it just said, oh, well, hey, I'm not running on version 4. It must be version 3. I can't work. And it put up a dialog box saying, this application requires Windows 95. Well, a lot of people did that. You'd think that most people would say, is it greater than or equal to 4? But no. So we had to, some of the very simple things like get in the way of the version call that the app makes and just say, hey, we'll just tell it it's version 4. It'll be happy, life will be good, and the app will work. So actually, that's one of the technologies we've got there. One of the more complex things we've got is some of the memory management. On the 9X operating system, the memory manager was, how should we say, not optimal. It wasn't the most robust of memory managers. Most of the time, the reason the Windows 98 or something would crash and reboot or whatever would be because an application was writing on an area of memory that it wasn't allowed to write on. And it generally had either another app sitting there, in which case that app looked like it crashed, and you're moaning at those guys, or it was actually a piece of system memory, in which case it caused the system to go wrong. Well, Windows 2000, we fixed all that. We stopped an application from doing any damage to anything else. Stopped it from damaging the system. We stopped it from damaging any other apps. And in a lot of cases, stopped it from damaging itself. That was great in Windows 2000 for business apps that had been written for NT. For most of the apps that were written for 9X, they just worked. They just moaned every now and then because Windows 98 just rebooted on them. They didn't know why. They thought it was the OS. It generally wasn't. So what we've actually done is we've even gone to the extent of taking the entire Windows 95 memory manager, wrapping that up inside a fix that we can plug into that application, surrounding it with the nice secure Windows XP memory manager, and letting the app think that it's doing damage all over the place, when actually it's not. So we got some pretty complex stuff there.
Basically a virtual 9X box.
Pretty much, yeah. So and I think one of the other things we realized is that there's a lot of applications that when you run a setup on them, they say, hey, what version of the OS are we running here? Is it 9X or is it NT codebase? And in which case, they decide what kind of driver to install. Maybe they'd install the old 9X driver, or if it was Windows 2000, they'd install like a newer kernel mode driver. And so the problem with upgrading your OS on top of what you've already got with the apps already installed is you're going to have the old driver on there. You upgrade to Windows XP, and the app's not going to work. And it wasn't really through any fault of their own. They'd done the right thing at installation time, and you've gone out and changed the landscape from under them. So what we've done is, in the setup of Windows XP now, we actually go and check your machine, and we look for what apps you have installed on that machine. And we pop a little report up. If we see any apps that you have installed that we know have some sort of problem, whether you need to uninstall them first, upgrade the OS, and reinstall them later, or whether maybe we just, at the time, we know that this app doesn't work on Windows XP. Maybe we don't know why yet, but we know there's a problem. Our philosophy is we'd rather tell you before you upgrade, rather than let you spend an hour and a half watching the wonderful little upgrade screens and reading all the text that marketing have put there, only to find that nothing works. Setup guys tell me they got a great uninstall, but we didn't think that was the best solution. So we now have a compatibility report, and I do urge you, if you're upgrading your OS, take a look at that, because there may actually be something useful there. Don't come moaning to us afterwards if we told you so beforehand.
I've had somewhere that's told me it won't work. I did it anyways, it works fine.
So we have 2 ways of doing that. And the best one is dynamic update. I don't know whether you've tried running setup and you've seen it come up and say, if you've been running an upgrade, say from Windows 2000 or some sort of version of an operating system that has an internet connection, it'll actually pop up and say, hey, do you want to go up onto the web and download the latest bits? And what we do at that point is we go up to Microsoft.com, we say, hey, do you have a newer version of our compatibility database? If there's one there, it'll download it, and then it does the scan on your hard disk. If you're doing a clean install and you're running, booting off the CD or something, then you don't have the internet connection, so we can't do that. But what we do in that case is once you've upgraded to Windows XP, then there is the potential for an internet connection. So at that point, the auto-update feature goes off, does a connection to the web, says, hey, have we got a new compatibility database? If it finds one, it downloads it, and then again, we've updated your system. So we try and make sure that we keep an updated version of our database on the website, and the system knows how to download that.
update that if like it's on a notebook, you don't have an internet connection, but you've got one that you get later?
Yeah, we provide a little package up on Windows Update as well, so you can go up to the website there and you can download that and then copy it to another machine if you need to. Right now, we don't plan to do that. Someone asked about slipstreaming. We're going to be slipstreaming that stuff. Right now, we don't plan to. We will be rolling into service packs, but slipstreaming gets very tricky because at that point then, especially for support, people don't really know quite what they got on the machine. But we thought the better mechanism was when you go to run setup. Downloading at that point guarantees you get the latest one, not just whatever the latest one was on the CD. Yeah, agreed. Okay, so what I'm going to do from here is just cut all this stuff out and just get down to some demos. So first thing I'm going to do, I've got an old Microsoft app called Neverhood. It was released in 1995, or yeah, it was the end of 95. It expects Windows 95 to run. It didn't even know that 98 was on the horizon. So when you run setup for this thing, you get the standard dialog box. Not very helpful. So what we've done is we've actually developed a wizard that allows people to use the technologies we've got in the build without having to be a developer or a Microsoft tester, for that matter. I'm going to go into the Help and Support Center. You could have actually navigated there. There was a shortcut on the headlines there that says, you have a program that doesn't work, click here. And this takes you to the program Compatibility Wizard. And I'm quite proud of this. We just got a brand new build today, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed this works. But what this does is this goes and says, hey, I want to choose an application that's from somewhere on my system. It goes and hunts around my system and looks to see all the executables, all the shortcuts that it finds. It looks on the desktop and it looks everywhere on the start menu. In this case, I actually have the setup installed on the desktop. So it's actually gone and found the Neverhood setup there. And what I can do is say, well, select compatibility mode for the program. This says, what was this designed to run on before? In this case, it was designed to run on Windows 95. So I'm going to select Windows 95. Believe it or not, by the way, we've actually had an app that broke, that was written for Windows 2000. We upgraded to Windows XP, and it broke. And it was doing a version check that said, is this version 5.0? You think they'd have learned by now. We also had some settings here for the display. Now we found a lot of children's applications, some of the edutainment apps that actually just pop up a dialog box that says, hey, this application requires 256 color mode, or this app requires 640 by 480. Now our designers, in their wisdom, took out the 256 color mode from the display control panel options. The theory being now that graphics cards support higher than that, and they want to get people up into the new colors, the new alpha blending, all the cool stuff that graphics cards do. But that left us with a little problem in that none of these kids' games worked anymore. So we've added some options back in here to enable you to turn on 256 color mode for that app, or 640 by 480 mode for that app. And what I'll do is I'll come back and show you that in a moment. So we say Neverhood setup. We're going to apply Windows 95 compatibility mode. And now we get a chance to actually try the app out again. And this time, fingers crossed, we got past the Windows 95 check. It's taking a little while to create a link somewhere, but it installed successfully. So this is one of the reasons I love this demo. Is this is what, back in the days when an app used to just take 1 or 2 disks rather than 3 CDs or something. So we've installed successfully now, so we can say, well, did this program work correctly? Yes, it did. It was an installation app, so as far as I'm concerned, it's a one-time install. I don't need to actually save any settings here, so I'll just say that I'm finished. Now, one of the things we've just added to the build today, which is why I'm a little nervous on clicking next there, is we realized that people are going out and trying the wizard to actually fix their applications. And that's great for them. But if it's not one of the apps on our test list, we didn't know that this application was broken and that was what compatibility mode it needed to fix it. So we had no way of getting that fix out to everyone else. So what we've done now is we've added an option in that allows you to actually send that data back up to us. And it's a very simple piece of XML, and there's an option in here you can click to actually see what the XML is that we send up. But it literally just is the name of the application, the executable information, and what mode it needed. It's about 40 or 50 bytes, it's tiny. And the idea is you say yes on this. I'm actually going to say no because things are working well and I don't want to risk it right now. Oh, maybe, what the hell, let's try it. There we go. So as you can see, the data needs moving down, the picture needs moving down a bit, but it's actually successfully sent the information up to Microsoft, and one of our guys now is wondering why the Neverhood is once again being told that it's just been fixed. But you know, they'll assume it was me eventually. I'm the only one that uses it. So at this point, we've successfully installed the Neverhood. Installing it's one thing, but now we want to run it. So as you can see, they weren't very original with their design here. We go and click on play. And, oh, it broke. In fact, even better than that, it broke the projector. Let's switch that back. Okay, believe it or not, that was intentional, the projector break wasn't. So, I think, great. Well, we know how to fix that now. We know that we have a way of fixing this application. So we go back to the Help and Support Center. I'll actually navigate through properly this time. So we say fixing a problem. Application software problem, and run software that worked with previous version. So we're back to the wizard again. Now, I glossed past this very quickly last time, but we do actually have an option as well. If it's not sitting on your machine, we can just say, hey, go and grab the program that's on the CD-ROM drive if you need to do an install. But again, in this case, we know that it's now installed. So we wait for this thing to go and find it. Somewhere down here is the Neverhood. So once again, it was designed for Windows 95, so we'll select that one. Don't need either of those, although maybe we should try one of them, but let's give it a try like this first. We're going to run the app. Fingers crossed. And there you go. It's running just fine. We hope. Yeah. Now we have to wait for this thing. I don't know if you've seen this app. It's actually great. It's like the big claymation thing, and you can have a lot of fun with this. I should probably kill this because I'll play with it for hours. So at this point we say, this time, you know, I'm going to keep clicking on that link from the start menu. I actually want to permanently fix this now because I want this to work every time I run it. So this time we're going to say yes, set this program to always use these settings. And once again, we go and get the data on the app, and I'm just going to annoy these guys a little more by saying, as soon as it worked last time, send the information back to Microsoft again. Okay. So just to prove that we've actually stored this stuff, what I'm going to do is go up here and show you the property sheet for that shortcut. And we've added a compatibility tab to the shortcut property sheets. And what you see here is it's actually now turned on the run this program using this compatibility mode. If you're a little more savvy and don't want to bother with the wizard, you can actually just go and try that yourself manually. But I think the wizard looks great, so I like using it. Got a question now?
Yeah, I assume since it's on the property sheet for the file itself, move the file retains the compatibility mode settings?
Actually, it does. In fact, I can show you. Yes, I can. I'm sorry. So the question was, does it retain the setting for across the path for the executable? Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that in a moment. So let's come back to a different question.
Yes. Is there any chance of bringing back the running compatibility mode icon? I think it's just so much easier than running.
You know, every single one of you, I'm going to send you over to Building 9 and tell everyone there that, because I got told to take it off. So we would love to have it back.
Feedback report, isn't it?
Yeah, send as many newsgroup requests as you can or something, please. We'll love to have that back. The UI police wanted a nice, clean desktop, so it had to go. Yeah.
You have an application which consists from multiple executables which launch each other, like a social setup, for instance. You start a setup with the exit, launches something else. Now, with that with Windows 2000, you have to track with the name of the second executable.
Yeah. So the question is, if you have a program that launches another application, so something like install Shield, where it launches one thing and then keeps launching a few others, do you have to go and set it for each one? The answer is no. If you set it for the first one, we actually propagate those fixes all the way through. So it works just fine. Some people over this side?
The run a separate memory space is on that one of those tabs.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Is it pretty much for 16-bit older programs?
Yes. Yeah, that starts off a new instance of the NTVDM, which is the old 16-bit emulation. Yeah.
You were mentioning about you could just go ahead and set it right from the tab, but in that case, would the information be transmitted back to Microsoft or not?
No. We're looking at that right now. We're trying to decide whether it makes sense if you turn it on in the tab to send it back to Microsoft or not. Some of our developers think it does. We've got a couple of Romanian developers that have rather dubious ideas of UI design. So right now, we're just trying to work on whether it works, it looks good or not. I think it's going to be a little weird.
Remove the tab until the wizard is run?
It's another option. We're still looking at different ways to improve on that. And at the moment, we're trying to find every way we can to get this thing in people's faces, because it's such a useful feature, but it's pretty hidden right now that we lost our icon.
Yeah. Is there a way to start an application compatibility with command line?
Yes, there is. Yeah, we have a run compat. That's the tool you can do from there. So I'm just going to show you one other little feature, and let me get back to some more questions if there are some. I've got a copy of Calc here, which I just dropped on the desktop. And I'd mentioned the run in 256 colors and the 640 by 480. I have a feeling this may well mess up the projector, but I'm going to try it anyway. First thing I was going to show is run in disable visual themes. When you run up Calc, you can see that it's the new buttons, the new look to the application. We've had some apps that actually don't work very well like that. So we've added this option on to disable visual themes. And if you turn that on and run the app again, you can see it goes back to the old look. UI police don't like that one, but they didn't like the icon either. So one of the other things we'll do is we can show, let's just go for all of them. Let's try it. We'll go for Windows 95 compatibility mode, we'll go for 256 color, we'll go for 640 by 480. Let's give it a go.
They're being stored.
We actually have a database which is inside the system, installed with the system. And there you go. We switched to 640 by 480, we switched to 256 color. This is why the UI police don't like it. And also the old visual theme. And just to prove that we are in compatibility mode as well, we run up the About box there. It thinks it's running on version 4, build 950. Now, just for those people that think, well, great, you've now hosed my system, when you close the app, it switches back to where it was.
What if you multitask?
So, I'm sorry?
What if you have more than one application?
So what we do is we actually do it per application. So if you switch to the other app, we'll switch modes back again. So.
You did like resize Windows, so the application will get exactly fine.
Yeah, that's the question.
Right. Well, the question is, what about if you have other applications running at the same time and you're switching them and then you resize Windows? My answer to that would be, what do you want? Do you want the app to work or not? I mean, we had to make some design decisions here, and the one there was, we're just going to switch it for that app. We could switch it for the whole thing, but most of the time, most people, for the apps that require 640 by 480, they're generally full-screen apps anyway. The edutainment titles, the kids' apps, so they generally run full screen. It's not normally a problem. Yeah.
Do all the apps running in compatibility mode run in the same virtual machine?
So one thing to note about compatibility mode, it's not a virtual machine. It's not like the NT thing that we had before. What we're actually doing is we have very, very targeted fixes that target specific API calls. So when an app makes a call into the system, we just get in the way of that. And we maybe fix up the call they're making or return back something different depending on what it used to do. That's right. I got to say as well that some apps may break when you run them under compatibility mode. We've tried to be very, very careful and very targeted with the fixes that we've made. But invariably, what we are doing is changing behavior. So if an app was written expecting the correct behavior and we go and change it out from under it, then there is a potential for it breaking, which is one of the reasons we were trying to decide about whether to report every instance back to Microsoft or not. But we found that through the amount of testing we've done, that we've got a pretty good hit rate now. And the more feedback we get from people, the better a hit rate we're getting. So please test your apps, try these things out, and let us know. And don't be afraid to tell us if things aren't working. Well, most people generally aren't that afraid to tell us that. But tell us if things are working as well, and we can try and refine this thing and make it the best that we can get. And with that, I think if there's no more questions, I'll hand over to Eugene. Oh, there's one more?
No, this wasn't a question. Comment, I wanted to let you know that compatibility mode also works extremely well on connected virtual PC.
Right, yes. Actually, we've been talking to Connectix. So we've been, one of the things we tried to do is, with all of this stuff, whenever we find any problems or we find some solutions, we've been making sure we talk to as many developers as we can. So rather than just finding a problem with an app and fixing it ourselves or swearing at someone else, we actually go and try and work with them on whether the best solution is for us to fix it up or for the vendor to actually fix it. So we've been doing an awful lot of working with other people across the board to try and make sure that this is the most compatible OS we've released. Okay, over to Eugene. If there's any more questions, catch me at the back.
Is there any way to do? Yeah, I know.
You're right, by the way.
Is there any way to do a stripped install for network? Let's say you've already got an app installed, you've got 50 PCs, you don't want to go visit every PC.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point, and I'll get shot for not doing this. So thank you for saving my bacon there. We actually have a toolkit on the web, and one of the things we have on there, we have some slightly more complex tools, Keyfix app and a couple of other things. We also have a tool called Compatadmin, and what that does is that allows you to build your own custom database, the same one similar to what we ship in the system, but with multiple apps and multiple fixes for those. So what you can do is you can take that database and then send it around your network and just install it on any machine, and that machine will get that whole collection of fixes. So there's a lot of information on our toolkit, msdn.microsoft.com/compatibility. And if you've got any more questions or...
One more quick. When you select this and take it, since it's so specific on other stuff you call, do you lose any of your XP abilities in that app? Let's say it has a network interface in it or something.
No. In fact, actually, we found that not only do you very rarely lose anything depending on the fix we make, but in some cases, actually, perf has been better. Because, for example, let's take the get version one. Normally, you'd have to make a call to ask what the version of the operating system is, and you go into kernel to do that. We intercept it and just return back 4 straight away. You're done. So we found that they pretty much balance out. There's some that are slightly slower, some that are slightly faster, but generally, performance is negligible, and the features you get still the same. Okay, Eugene. Yeah. I'll be around to back again with Eugene's session for any more questions.
All right, can you guys all hear me okay? All right, cool. So Mark's been talking about application compatibility, and I'm here to tell you about device compatibility. How many of you have used a device with Windows? All right, anyway, silly. I'm Eugene Lin. I'm program manager for device compatibility at Microsoft, and today I was going to talk about, first just sort of the state of today's world and device compat, and let you guys, tell you guys a little bit about, the kind of things that we see in trying to make everything work. I'll go through some design goals in Windows XP, talk about some cool new features we've got, and a little bit on looking forward, because it's kind of funny. After everyone else here is going to be having parties after we're done with the CD, all of our real work starts. So talk about that later. But anyway, in general, most people, they just want PCs to be simple, like a toaster, like a VCR that, happens to do 5,000 other things. And, the reality, unfortunately, is that, people, they need to call tech support to do something simple, like plug in a printer, call your computer geek friend to find out how to get something to work right or how to make two things work together. And we really want to try to make it as easy as possible to take all of this complexity and make it seem simple. A lot of people ask, device compatibility, right? If everything just worked before, then it should just work today. Why would anything change when we come out with Windows XP? I wanted to talk about some of those technical hurdles. As Mark was talking about, going from Windows 9X, Windows 95, Windows 98 to Windows XP, we've got a new kernel. This is Windows NT. It's a different operating system. So on the driver side, that means in almost all cases, new code has to be written. And there are a lot of products out there that were designed for home use. For example, joysticks and digital cameras, where those vendors weren't aiming for Windows NT because Windows NT wasn't aimed at home users. And now Windows XP is taking all of that technology and moving into the home. And that means that these companies need to do a lot of work, and we've been helping them migrate some of their drivers over. The other thing is footprint and timing changes. And this actually affects Windows 2000, even though one of our goals is Windows 2000 compatibility. And in this case, sometimes it's simple things like machines get a little bit faster. You think, how does that affect anything? Well, other pieces of hardware don't get faster. So you might have a printer that was designed 7 years ago that never thought it would get these two commands that close together. And we run into those, and that's really regardless of Windows XP or Windows 2000. It's just that if somebody upgrades to XP and they happen to get a new computer, well, now we hit these. Poor reverse engineering. There are a lot of cases when, people, including Microsoft, right, will go and look at the specification for how something is supposed to work, and there might be some missing information. So you look at code, you figure out how things are working, and you do the best you can to make everything work. And in some cases, those assumptions were a little bit off, and those change. Non-technical hurdles, these are actually our bigger problems, which kind of stinks because it means the developers can't fix them. Economic disincentive. If you're selling hardware and Microsoft comes and says, we'd like you to make the old hardware that you're not selling anymore and you're not making money on, we'd like you to make that continue to work for the next 3 years. Then that's not a lot of incentive, right? And then so you weigh that against your customers are going to be really happy. The PCs overall are going to be perceived as better. The industry is going to grow. The set of users are going to grow. And you'll have more return customers later on because you'll show that you're supporting them well. That's an easy argument to make to some people and a really hard argument to make to other people, especially the ones whose companies have folded. So that's something that we look at a lot. And IP issues here, this is intellectual property. What we consider to be valuable secrets and not are very different than what other people consider. And when the valuable secrets include things like how the hardware works, then it's really hard for us to do anything beyond, we are willing to help you as much as we can. So design goals. Our first goal is ease of use, right? Make it so that plug and play actually does what it sounds like it's supposed to do. Device coverage. Make sure that just anything out there that you can plug into a computer that runs Windows XP works as good as it possibly can on that machine. Windows 2000 compatibility. Windows XP is built on the Windows 2000 kernel. We want to make sure that as much as we've added all these cool new features and all this cool new stuff in Windows XP, that to a driver writer, if you've done the work to go to Windows 2000, very little has changed. And your Windows 2000 code just works without you even touching it. Supportability. This is, in the event that something goes wrong, because, we hear sometimes things go wrong. In the event that something goes wrong, we want the amount of time it takes you to fix your machine, or it takes an administrator to fix the machine, to be as short as possible. And then the last one is raising industry quality. PCs being complicated hurts everybody. Hurts users, hurts Microsoft, it hurts hardware vendors, it hurts everyone. And we don't want people to think that PCs are this, this abomination. We want them to become good machines. So, to help with ease of use, the first thing we've done is simplified plug and play. You've all seen on Windows 2000 Windows 98, you plug in a device, and you get that little pop-up right in the middle of your screen, right? It covers up everything you're doing. It says, I found a device, and there's no buttons, right? We're not telling you anything. I found a device, and you're going to look at me. And so what happens now, and you've probably seen this, is that in the taskbar, there'll be a little balloon will come up that says, hey, we found some new hardware. And in most cases, the only other thing you're going to see is the little balloon changes to your hardware's working now. And that's it. There's nothing that comes up to interfere with you. And the Windows Update is actually a really key part of our device compatibility story. New devices come out all the time. In the time between when we're done with the CD and everyone's partying, and it actually shows up in the stores, hundreds of new devices are going to show up on the market. And we need a way to support all of those, even though the CD's already done, and it's in boxes, and it's in the stores and on the shelves. And Windows Update is the way we're addressing that. So on Windows Update, we'll have a library of drivers for new devices. We're constantly updating that every day, in fact. And when you plug a device in, if Windows doesn't find a driver on the CD or in your hard drive, then it'll automatically go up and check Windows Update, assuming you're connected. If you're not connected, it'll prompt you and say, would you like to connect to the internet to check for more drivers? And so if you're running on a broadband connection, if you're on a network, or if you're at home and you're dialed in and you plug in a device, if Windows can find the driver on Windows Update, you'll see exactly the same UI as you would as if it was on the CD. So this means that instead of being limited, and we really are limited by the 600 or so meg we can fit on the CD, we can now go up and check the library of tens of thousands of drivers that we've got online. The second part is dynamic update. So this is, say we've got a network card that comes out after Windows XP ships. Well, how do you support that? Because if you load Windows XP, you can't get on the network. If you're doing an upgrade, say you're running Windows Millennium, and you go to upgrade to Windows XP, dynamic update will actually connect while you're still running Windows 98 or Windows Millennium. It'll connect to Windows Update and pull down drivers that it needs for your network adapter, for your modem, for anything that you need to connect, so that when setup runs, it now acts as if that was already on the CD, and you'll continue to stay connected.
Does it identify those at that time?
Yes, it'll actually detect the hardware on your machine, compare that against the drivers it's already found locally, and then go up to Windows Update to download anything that it doesn't have locally. And then auto update is actually there for the case where, say you've got a computer and you've already upgraded to Windows XP, and you have something like a 1394 port, and you don't even use it, but it's not working, and that's kind of okay for now, but you might want to plug something in later on. If we come out with a driver later on, after you've already installed and put it on Windows Update, then auto update will actually come and prompt you in the taskbar and say, we have new software for your hardware, would you like to install it? And you'll just get it. So you don't have to keep going up to the Windows Update site and polling every day. Yes?
Is there a chance to uninstall one of those auto updates when it doesn't work?
Yes, all of those updates that you get from Windows Update can all be uninstalled through either the Windows Update interface, where it lists all the packages you've gotten, or you can go through the driver rollback mechanism, just like you would any driver on the system. Or if you want, you can do system restore and just smack everything back. So device coverage. Our goal is to support, as many devices as we can on the CD. We learned during Windows 2000 and during Windows Millennium that there are a lot of different sources where we can find out what devices people have. And going through our beta program, our beta program is great and it's huge, but looking at the number of devices we're tracking compared with the number of people we've got in our beta program, if every device out there was represented in our beta program, we'd have maybe 2 people with each kind of device. And that's really not enough coverage. So we've got some market data firms that we work with to track retail sales, corporate sales. We go talk to our IHV partners, the people who are actually building the hardware, and ask them, hey, as far as we know, you've built this many of them. Where do they go? Are they in the Bay in Hong Kong, or are they in stores, right? And today we have support for around on the order of 10,000 devices in Windows XP, and this is on the CD. We've added support for things like game controllers, digital cameras, scanners, 3D graphics, things that we weren't really concentrating on in Windows 2000, but are important in Windows XP. For the upgrade, this is where you go to the store and you buy the box with Windows XP and you install. We're focusing on systems that were sold January 2000 and later, and that is, the marketing guys were really not very happy at this, but we want to make sure that this is something that we can manage. And supporting every system in the world is just, we do not have the people and the time to do that. So we're trying to focus on this smaller set of systems so that those do work as well as possible. We're also cooperating with the top OEMs on their estimates of what they've sold, what they will be selling, so that we can go after those systems. So like I was saying before, well-written Windows 2000 drivers run unmodified on Windows XP. If you've got a system that's running Windows 2000 and you've got support for those devices, then that's just going to continue to work. We're focusing on signed drivers. This is drivers that have gone through our logo testing program, only because if we sign up for anything beyond that, we're talking about anyone who writes code, we will support, and that's a really big set. So we're looking at signed drivers, which limits it to several tens of thousands of drivers. Exceptions. So far, based on our testing, display adapters is a category where we found that Windows 2000 display drivers generally don't work in Windows XP. This is, after we all had a heart attack and woke up the next day. It's not as bad as it sounds because we do have support for, we think about 98% of the display adapters out there built into the CD already. But this does mean that if you take a Windows 2000 driver and install it in Windows XP, Windows will actually default to the Windows XP driver instead. The same goes for 1394 controllers and USB controllers, but in most cases, there'll be drivers that ship on the system you buy for those things, or in the CD in the case that you upgrade. Online device help is a new feature we've got, and this was actually added pretty late in the product, like really late in the product, so that the non-marketing people were all mad at us. If you plug in a device and you've gone through the little wizard that says we couldn't find a driver, we couldn't find a driver, we couldn't find a driver, sorry, we couldn't find a driver. Well, we changed that last dialogue because that wasn't a very good message to give people. We just couldn't find a driver, sorry. And so what will happen now is after you've gone through that, you'll get taken to Help Center and you'll get a question. Would you like to send information to Microsoft about this hardware so we can help you find a solution? And what will happen there is if you say yes, we'll connect to the internet, we'll send up a plug-and-play ID for that device, along with information that, hey, this is Windows XP we're reporting on, this is Beta 2, this is RTM, and we'll get that information so that now we have a database of, I think right now it's about like 6,600 devices we've gotten reports on from the beta, of here are all the devices that people are trying to plug in and we're not helping them. And we can now go after that on a priority basis. Regardless of what the marketing reports say, what the news reports say, this is actual users running Windows XP can tell us this is what's broken, help us, fix it. The other thing we can do is that once you've sent that information to Microsoft, we actually look in a database and find out whether we have any information to give back to you. And you saw the app help mechanism that Mark was showing, where we bring up Help Center with some message there. We can actually provide a custom message for any piece of hardware. So say, something new hits the market, sells 2 million copies, and you plug it in. Maybe the first message you'll get is, I'm sorry we don't have support for this, we're working with the manufacturer, we think it'll be done in May. You'll at least know that instead of, sorry we couldn't find a driver. And we'll have time to update that over time and eventually put it on Windows Update so you don't see the message at all. Windows driver protection is another thing that we've added, and this is, again, one of those features that we wish we didn't have to have, but it's there, because in the real world, there are drivers that tank Windows. Drivers running the kernel, they can do just as much damage as a developer at Microsoft could do. So because of that, we want a way to protect it. So Windows driver protection is actually a feature where, at a really low level, down at the ZW load driver API, we actually check the driver against a list of drivers that we know cause problems, and we stop it from loading. And what this means is, that device isn't going to work, which is not a happy experience, but we're going to be doing that for drivers where we know the alternative is your machine blue screens, your machine hangs, you corrupt the page file, you corrupt memory, and in these cases, you'll get a message in the taskbar that says, a little balloon will come up that says, a driver just tried to load that's known to have problems. You can get information about the driver. We'll take you up to the help center so that you can find more information. Yes?
Will you update that bad driver list?
The bad driver list is also updated through Windows Update. So we'll update it actually. It actually rides along the same mechanism that the application compatibility database uses. Yes?
Are you planning to create some sort of dense information which can be from the 469 and progress controller when you start setup and the setup brings in a certified web driver and you don't have a way to roll back because the crash returns the text model, the text part of the setup?
I didn't hear that.
In the build 2469, there was a new purpose driver, which caused a lot of grief to many people. Now, the problem occurred when you started upgrade from 2465 to 2469, and the 2469 would bring in the bad driver. It was certified, but unfortunately it crashed and the text part was set. So is there any way to roll back that particular driver before continuing the setup?
Okay, so the question was, if we have a driver, in the promised driver in this case, in a build that's bad, is there a way to stop that driver from loading during setup so that you don't tank the machine? Well, first of all, if the driver is something that we're shipping in the build, it's much easier to deal with it by changing that driver through Windows Update instead of actually changing the database. So dynamic setup runs before setup runs and actually has an opportunity to replace any file in setup. So if there's a driver that we know about that's bad, we can go replace it through dynamic setup so that the driver isn't there when we do the upgrade. The last bit is System Restore, and System Restore has been there in Windows Millennium. If you guys have used that, you've seen it. It basically says, my machine was working on this day, go back to the way it was in that day. And something we've added is, when you install a driver that hasn't been signed, right? This is a driver that hasn't gone through testing, or at least hasn't passed testing, then we'll automatically snap a restore point when you install that driver, because our product support data shows that at least twice as many problems come from drivers that haven't been signed versus the ones that have. So based on this, we'll automatically do a restore point so that if something goes wrong with your machine, you can go back and you'll go back to the last point where we saw something land on the machine that hasn't been signed. Industry quality, this is aimed a little bit more at the development community, but basically we've got a new DDK, a driver development kit for Windows, and this lets you build drivers for a lot of the OSs that we've shipped in the past, because hardware companies work on everything, including Windows XP, so we want to make sure we support them. The logo test tools, these are the tests that people actually run to get signed, to get the design for Windows XP logo on their machines or on their hardware. And we've actually made some huge improvements to the tests, because those tests are what make the difference between drivers that are just a bunch of random code and drivers that actually pass and meet all the specifications and requirements. And based on customer problem reports, we've actually added a lot of new programs. The biggest one being antivirus, so that now these drivers that Mark was talking about from the antivirus vendors actually go through a test program, just the drivers, so that we know that those aren't going to do anything bad to the system. Moving forward, I've been talking about Windows Update a lot. Windows Update, we're making a really big bet here on Windows Update, right? Not everyone has internet connectivity, but it's growing at a phenomenal rate. And, beyond, airdropping CDs like some other companies have been doing, that it's really hard to support people who don't have any connectivity. So we're going to continue to grow the set of supported devices even after RTM. And this is why I was saying everyone else is going to be out there partying and everything like that. And what we're going to see is we're going to see this set of reports from devices that haven't been found. We're going to see that spike from about the 6,000 that it's at now to, we're guessing somewhere in the 20, 30,000 reports a day range. And based on that, we're going to try to go address those problems, as many of them as we can, before launch, before it actually hits the shelves. And this is actually going to be really interesting for us, because we think that it would be interesting to the rest of the industry as well to see what kind of things happen when we can get immediate feedback like this. Yes, in the back? Are you just telling us about time? Sorry, it's so dark out there. Today, for Windows 2000, we've actually got about 5,000 drivers online. And I know most of you aren't going to see them, because most of you don't have those 5,000 devices on your computers. But they're up there, and actually compared to about 2 years ago when we had 12, this is a big improvement. Another change we've made is the HCL, the hardware compatibility list. If you go to Microsoft.com/HCL, you'll see this. It's a list of all the devices that have passed our logo testing or have passed testing on Windows XP. And we actually have a list for Windows XP up there right now for Beta 2. One change that we've made is we're only including devices that have drivers on Windows Update, because when a vendor goes through testing, they can basically check the little box and sign the agreement that says, you can put this on Windows Update so the driver is automatically installed. Now, some vendors don't do this for all kinds of reasons. And what we found is there were cases when someone would give us a driver and say, here, test this. And we test it, and it would be good, and everything's good, and we put the name on the list, and everybody's happy. And then that driver never, ever sees the light of day. That driver goes through our testing and is deleted or is stored or something. And then people would go out and buy the hardware, install it, and they can't find the driver. And they go to the company, and the company would say, we're not giving it to you. So we've actually modified the hardware compatibility list so that we're only going to list devices that have drivers on Windows Update. And what this means is if your device is listed on the hardware compatibility list, when you plug it in, we're going to go up the internet, and we're going to find a driver. And that's why we want the experience to be, you don't sift through the box, you don't find the CD, you don't do all of this. You plug it in, and you get the little message. You're ready to go. Yes?
What
kind of communications have you had with the motherboard manufacturers, i.e. ACPI, and some of the problems with some of the devices?
Okay, so the question is, how much communication have we had with motherboard manufacturers on ACPI and other problems? We've actually been working with all the top OEMs and actually some of the middle and bottom OEMs on system problems that we've seen. So there's testing on a lot of fronts. On the one side, we've got technology-focused teams that test, the 8,000 printers that we know about and all the display devices. We've also got a set of people who are testing, like the goal is by RTM we'll have like the top 200 systems, and this means actually going to the store and buying the system the way it is, doing an upgrade and testing everything on it, all the devices, all the applications. And when we find problems, we'll go back to whatever vendors wrote the code or built the hardware that caused that problem. Does that answer your question?
You've been talking about BIOS upgrades specifically for XP.
AML calls.
So actually one change we've made internally, BIOS upgrades. Windows 2000, we actually cheated ourselves a lot, right? A lot of people would go get BIOS upgrades and install them. And BIOS upgrades are not fun to install. They're not easy to install. And in Windows XP, we've actually gone out to all the test teams and started doing these BIOS audits, right? The BIOS police would go out and say, the BIOS you've got on this machine isn't what's in CompUSA. The BIOS you've got on this machine isn't the thing that shipped on the machine 5 years ago. Go back to that BIOS. And most people would say, oh my God, you can't, my machine's gonna break, right? But what we would say is, if you load the machine and you hit enter until all the dialogues go away and the BIOS ends up on the machine, fine, use the BIOS. If not, you can't use that BIOS. It's not good because other people have the older BIOS. And we've gone back through those and tried to find software that does work on those. And in cases where they don't, we've gone to the vendors and talked with them. And in most cases, you'll see the Windows XP Ready program coming out. And this is up on the Windows XP site. It's not up there now, probably in a week or two. There'll be a list of systems and vendors that have Windows XP Ready machines. And for all those machines, those vendors have signed up to provide updates to their customers, whether it's by CD, whether it's on the web, whether it's through, you get a piece of mail with a disk in it, that will have any updates you might need to go to Windows XP. And in those cases, if the BIOS really needed updating, the OEM will provide instructions to the customer on here's how you do it, or at least here's how you get it upgraded. Yeah?
Microsoft phone.
Mm-hmm.
Will you ever get it to work on XP?
Okay.
Will Microsoft ever get it?
Okay, Microsoft Phone, and the question is, will we ever get the Microsoft Phone to work on Windows XP? Right now, we're tracking about, no. So right now we're tracking about 15. Right now we're tracking about 15 to 20,000 devices that we know about out there, and it's actually really it's actually kind of an interesting job to track devices, because if you go to a store and ask them what devices they've sold, all you get is really a list of strings, right? Here's a bunch of names, and when we don't know whether two names are a little bit off because of a typo or because of an actual marketing decision made at a company or because of a technical decision, and based on that list we try to find the most popular devices out there, devices that we think people have. And the Microsoft Phone is not a very popular device. I mean, the people who have it love it or hate it or both. And that falls into the same bucket as everything else, where we look at how many people have it, how many XP users we think are going to be using it, and based on that, we'll try to scale our support efforts to fit that. And right now, I believe, right, I'll have to go back and check on this, and we'll talk after this, but I believe that is not currently on the set of things that need to be supported, at least by launch, right? We may add support later on, or at least have the capability to.
Because it carries the same name as the operating system.
Yes.
Okay. You said some companies have, go under, go out of business, there's nobody there to support their hardware. Well, even though Microsoft is a big monolithic company, there are groups that do individual projects, or they're on business units, and the phone business unit doesn't exist anymore. There's nobody there to convert to VXDs. So part of the reason we won't see it is it's effectively the same thing as if a small company has gone out of business. The product unit is not there.
Basically, there's a reason why you haven't seen Phone 2.
Let's do one more question for Eugene, and then we're going to move on to Internet Explorer. One more question.
Okay.
And I guess you probably answered it, but I just want to be sure. If it doesn't work in Windows 2000, you're not going to try to make it work again.
Okay, so the question is, if it doesn't work on Windows 2000, we're not going to make it work on XP. No, we're actually targeting a lot of devices out there that don't work on Windows 2000.
A wonderful parallel scanner that I bought 7 years ago. That's $500.
Okay.
It was a great
So-
scanner.
okay, so-
But it's a parallel scanner.
So she's got a parallel port scanner that she bought a while ago, paid a lot of money for it, really likes it, really wants to get it to work. This is actually a really good point. So parallel port, right? Parallel port is something that we would like to see go away because it's moving to USB, moving to a different connectivity mechanism means that plug and play works better, means that device installation is faster, means that we can identify the devices. And in places like in printers, like in scanners, we are supporting, there are a number of parallel port devices that we are supporting, but we're trying to focus more of that on newer devices, only because if someone buys a new PC, there are machines coming out that don't have parallel ports, and the companies that were making those devices aren't manufacturing them anymore. So we kind of have to look at, if we're putting the effort in to make that device work, how much are we helping in the future versus making these other ones work? And in some cases, that does mean, new support. And we've actually found cases where making old hardware work like that isn't really possible without compromising other features in XP. I mean, believe it or not, the only way to make some parallel port devices work is to replace the entire parallel port stack so that no other parallel port device will ever work. And in some of those cases, we've had to make the call, and in that case, it's really a matter of deciding, right? Are all of the other features in XP worth it to you, the price of getting a new scanner? Or if it's really important to make that scanner work, there are OSs that do that, but most people aren't happy with those. So,
Thank you, Eugene. Thanks to Mark. Appreciate these guys.